What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Two Commoners podcast. I am here with my dude Hunter.
Yeah, welcome back. Good to be back. It's been a while. It's been a couple weeks.
It's been a long while.
Hope everyone is doing good. There's a lot of stuff going on around us that is probably popping up all over social media and can't seem to get away from it. So we're gonna try to shed some light on some stuff that's going on. See if we can bring some new ideas to your minds and some new opinions, some good conversation we're gonna have today.
Say, Hunter, what have you been up to this past 2 weeks?
What have I been up to? I have been
During our hiatus.
Yeah, I've been working. Just sold my car. That was a hassle. Yeah. I had a buyer, and the person who was going to buy it told me to meet them halfway, so I did. I went there on Saturday. Didn't show up. She didn't show up. Or no, she told me, can we do it tomorrow? And I told her I meet her in Stillwater, so I was at the bridge, the Stillwater Bridge.
Ooh.
And then I had to turn around.
Did you end up selling it?
And then she's like, so it was the next day, and I told her I would meet her at Stillwater Target at like 6. So I got there. She never showed up. And then I sold it to a different person. Because fuck that person.
Yeah, fuck that person. And
Honestly.
You
I've
know,
never been more mad, but I sold it.
Oh, I'd be mad too, dude.
Yeah.
It's like, man, it's like you got stood up by a Tinder date, except they were buying your car.
Jesus. Yeah, I guess. I mean.
Twice in a row. I'm sorry, can we reschedule?
Yeah.
Just say you don't want the damn car.
Yep.
Just,
Honestly.
like, seriously, guys.
Yeah. And then the next day, after she ghosted me, she was like, "Sorry, I didn't see any of your text messages. Is the car still available?" I didn't respond.
Should have done, like, the middle finger emoji. Just like...
Yep. Should have.
Yeah.
Alright.
Okay.
Now let's get into... Wait, what have you been up to? Sorry. My bad. How rude of me.
I literally, like, thought... I was like, is he not gonna fucking ask?
How rude of me. That is awful.
Okay, no, it's okay. I was low-key gonna just fucking tell you if you didn't ask.
Yep.
No, but I've been working the landscaping job as part of my mission to become a more manly man.
Manual labor.
Yeah, you know, I can... For once in my life, I can truly say I've given blue-collar labor a chance.
With the forearms? Those Did you burn yourself?
That happened at Jimmy John's, dude.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. Can we get a...
Throw up the burn?
Okay. This is tricky. Can you see
tough.
it? Can you see it?
No. Okay, moving on. How's landscaping?
It's been good.
Yeah.
Hard work, but not something I want to bring up is there's a few immigrants who work there.
Yeah.
Some of the most hardworking people I've ever seen, dude.
Really?
Shit, you know, they've been doing it for like 7 years, and one of them always like basically tells me I'm doing things wrong, which is completely understandable because no doubt I am doing it wrong when he tells me that. So I'm always getting showed up by these immigrants who are just absolute pros at this. They speak fluent Spanish.
That's cool.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like a little paranoid they're talking about me in Spanish. And just like roasting me right in front of my face in a language I can't understand.
That's alright. Could be worse.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me want to learn Spanish.
Yeah.
There's some like white guys there who know Spanish, or at least partially, and it's weird to me that there's like people who do blue collar jobs but they're fluent in 2 languages. Like, I'm not even talking about like the immigrants who like obviously grew up in another language and they came to America. I'm talking about like the people who grew up in America and have done that their whole life. And there's a few people there who are like that. A lot of them kind of speak Spanish because they've been working with like immigrants like that for like most of their life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool how people pick up like, typically we think of like language as like a very book smart intellectual skill, but really it's a lot more of like a social thing, a lot more of a thing people pick up impromptu. So yeah, kind kind of cool to be exposed to that. Although, gonna be real, I wouldn't want to do this forever. In fact, I don't even know if I'm gonna do it the whole summer. But I've decided. Looked at myself in the mirror because I was thinking about quitting after 1 week.
Jesus.
It really was. I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, "Hey,
Stop.
you do a whole month
Yep.
before you. Then you can say you did a whole month. A month is nice and clean."
Jesus. Nice paycheck. I'm
Dude,
sure.
I am like, so excited, bro.
Yeah.
I am so excited. Gonna be swimming in money. We're gonna get this place all decked out.
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, gotta pay for the college first, but then we'll deck it out.
Boo. Boo. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Then I'll have like my dad being like, "Sid, something about your college." I don't know. I didn't really have that.
Yeah.
Didn't really have that one fleshed out there, guys.
Yep.
God,
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying your work. Because it obviously seems like you are.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of hate it while I'm doing it, but
Yeah,
it's
I
one of
know.
those things where I get home and I'm like, I can feel kind of good for doing. I just don't like it when I feel, because there's some days where it's like, God, I'm so bad at this. Why am I not fired?
That's right.
Makes me feel a little privileged. Makes me feel like shit you not, been thinking a little bit of my own, I guess you could say, white privilege lately. Not just really even white privilege. I think it has more to do with middle class privilege. I know a lot of people correlate that with being white. It is in some respects, but obviously, I think since those factors are not completely dependent on each other and they're independent, I think the class aspect has more to do with privilege than the race aspect.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about how, like, if I wanted to, I have the option to not necessarily work because I have parents who would support me. Although, I think it's funny because I have some friends who, like, basically don't work and are being supported by either the government because of the unemployment benefits right now, or they live with their parents still. And it's funny because my parents would never let me be around without a job or going to school. They'd be like, my dad being that classic Republican would be like, "You gotta get a job, you deadbeat."
No.
Which I understand. You gotta do something. Although sometimes I wish that since I have the ability to basically focus less on having to slave away to stay alive, since me staying alive is not dependent on that. I wonder what it'd be like to have more time to pursue hobbies and like artistic things, because like when I'm old, I'm not gonna have any choice but to slave away. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So like,
it's the death march, as they call it.
well, like, it's just one of those things, man, where like, can we move this mid? I feel like this is a bad idea.
Yeah, it is a bad idea.
We did it anyhow.
Yeah. Okay.
It probably sounds like shit, but we just moved the microphone. But yeah, I don't know, man. And it's got me thinking a lot more about like my place in the world. It's got me thinking more about like what life really is, since you only live one and you don't want to like waste it or anything.
Yeah.
And some people don't really have the option to live fulfilling lives because they have other people to support and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Lots of thoughts ticking around in my brain. You want to hop right into it now?
Yep. You start us off.
Alright, so following the Minneapolis riots, as I've heard commenters refer to it as, there's been a lot of opinions shared on social media and Snapchat from various people. And I remember I started working that landscaping job, and on like my second day working on the landscaping job, I posted a story, Snapchat, that basically said, "Get a job helping builder create something. Destruction is for losers." And that generated a little bit of controversy in my reply inbox. People telling me that I didn't understand, I wasn't on board with the movement, stuff like that. And I don't know, do you think what I said specifically was controversial? Obviously people read into it
Yeah.
a little bit more.
I do.
Yeah, well, so you told me I was woke though. What the
Huh?
fuck? You said I was woke though.
Yeah, that was I mean,
Were you joking?
it,
Like,
it was a woke thing to say, but no, I do think
what the fuck, dude? What side are you on?
I'm not on your side, but I am on your side. No, I think
Cryptic as always.
Yep.
Truly woke.
that's right. I think it's not your fault. I just don't think you understand.
Oh,
Yeah.
not claiming to be.
And I think that's where the controversy comes into play.
Well, there's a South Park bit where this is very relevant. I promise you.
Okay.
Where Stan's dad says the N word on Wheel of Fortune.
Okay.
So it's a whole funny bit. You should watch it. But then the next day he goes to school and there's like the black kid at school and Stan walks past him and everybody's like watching as Stan walks past. The black kid in South Park's name is Token, by the way. But he walks past Token, and everybody's like watching this confrontation, waiting to see what Token says to Stan, and vice versa, because of what Stan's dad said on TV. And Stan just said, "Hey, I'm sorry about what my dad said, and I get it and everything." And Token seemed to be fine, but once Stan said, "I get it," Token got mad and like told him off. And the entire episode, Stan would keep going up to Token and try to be like, "I understand and I sympathize with you, but you shouldn't hold this against my dad." And Token would just keep being mad at him. And then at the end of the episode, after events that conspire, Stan has a realization that he doesn't understand. He doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And he goes up and he tells Token that. He's like, "I get it now, Token. I don't get it." And then he smiles at him, and they're friends again.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about that scene a lot lately, and I think that not only applies to issues of race, that applies to issues of whether somebody has depression and somebody doesn't, whether somebody has, whether like issues of like gender too,
Mm-hmm.
like obviously somebody who's cisgender doesn't truly understand what it feels like to be transgender, even if they sympathize. Same with like what it's like to be a woman in a man's world. Like you can kind of like try to intellectualize and understand what it would be like to be a different identity, and you can like look at the actual facts and the data like we were earlier with how African Americans are treated different by police. But you'll never truly understand from your perspective, because humans being very egotistical and self-centered things, that's why almost every theory of morality that humans have developed completely centers around humans being the source of all value, because humans are so human-centric and they're self-centric. So we'll never truly understand what it's like to be a different race or a different sex, or have different mental chemistry going on in our brains. Mm-hmm. Like it's just how it is. And but back to what I said on my Snapchat story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole idea.
I wasn't condemning the protesters. Can we get that out of the way?
Yeah, you weren't Yeah, I get that.
I definitely was not. And
let's make something clear. Like, a lot of people that were doing the destruction were outsiders, whether it be far right, far left, or just people trying to take advantage of the situation.
See, and that's one thing that I find hilarious, because I've been noticing a lot of people on social media who are like with the movement, pro BLM, who are trying to make it seem like the protests and the riots are the same thing, which is funny because that's like the same thing like Fox News is doing. It almost seems like the people who are kind of like more center left are the people who are trying to keep them separate, because the reason people who are like very pro with the movement and basically pro revolution want the riots and the protests to be the same thing or be perceived as the same thing is because they want to make it seem like the protesters had no other outlet than to riot. And that's certainly a perspective that I understand why someone would go with, because obviously if you live in a socioeconomic situation that you're trapped in, there might get to a point where you feel as though peaceful protests don't do fucking anything, so you gotta like take the power into your own hands, stuff like that. And they're basically arguing that the reason the protests like evolved or devolved into that is because that's what happens in an oppressive society when people aren't being listened to. So I just find it interesting that I see people on more right-winged media and not even like all right wing media. Like Ben Shapiro still makes a huge distinction between the protesters and the rioters.
Yeah.
But I mean, depending on who you watch, I mean, when you get more into like Candace Owens territory and shit like that, that's when they also seem to basically say there's no distinction between the two. But then you notice, but then when I look at the other side, they also say there's no distinction between the two, but it's almost for different reasons. The obviously people who are farther right don't really want to change like society. They think things are kind of fine the way they are.
Yep.
And that legislation should move slow. We shouldn't have really any movement in any direction. So they'll, to discredit the movement of defunding the police, they'll point to the riots and say, look at the protesters and put them all into one basket. But then the people who are pro-revolution, who basically think that we need radical change now, will also put the protesters and the rioters in the same boat and say, hey, if you sympathize with the protests, which a lot of people do, I'm pretty sure most people are pro fixing the police departments and like anti-police brutality. So they kind of capitalize that and say, hey, the protests don't work, so that's why the protests have turned violent, and these aren't just rioters, these are revolutionaries, and this is the right side of history.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just think it's interesting that you have that both sides are kind of doing that same thing for completely different reasons of trying to kind of say that they're one and the same.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. That's why so many people get upset when people condemn the rioters or say stuff that like because what I said had literally nothing to do with the protesters or being anti the movement. It just had to do with I didn't like the fact that people were looting and destroying stuff like that. Looting and destroying communities that are disproportionately minority, by the way. And like most of the small businesses that are destroyed, like a lot of them are owned by minorities because they were in minority areas. But the media focuses on the big stores that get destroyed because obviously less people give a shit about Target. And
Yep.
I'll be real, even though obviously I'll say that I don't like violence, and I don't. I could honestly not really give much of a shit about Target, but that's just because I know they'll be okay. Call that cynical or whatnot, but I do have a problem with all the small businesses being destroyed, especially because people like right now with COVID going on, some of the insurance was not on all those businesses because they weren't even open.
Yeah.
Or a lot of insurance companies don't cover like rioting.
Yep.
So I don't know, man. I just don't like the fact that people are trying to put those in the same box regardless of what the motivation is with the protesters and the rioters. Because I feel like people who are support the movement get mad when anybody says anything that's like, hey, I agree with the message, but I don't like police brutality, or I don't like police brutality and I agree with the message, but I don't like this violent reaction to it. When you say that, you're suddenly anti-movement because those people have put the protesters and the rioters in the same boat. You know what I mean? Despite the fact that a large portion of the protesters have gone out and condemned the rioters.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
then,
a lot of the rioters are gone now.
yeah, no doubt.
It's majority of what's
Yes.
happening. It's peaceful.
It's died down now,
Yeah.
without a doubt. But that first like week and a half was freaking crazy.
Yeah.
And it was like all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And mayors and governors were telling like their police departments to stand down and stuff. And I don't know, man. When I see some of the videos of the riots, I can clearly tell it's more about capitalism for a lot of the people rioting than anything else. Like a lot of those people are out fighting the anti-capitalist war, and this was their time. Honestly, seems almost like a big middle finger to George Floyd, in my opinion, that they freaking take advantage of that to fight capitalism, which isn't the issue at hand. And I know that that's not what at all the protests are about.
Yeah.
The protests are about police brutality, and I'm sure some of the riots and some of the violent action, like obviously burning down the precincts is about that. And obviously that's not something I really condone, but at least I get it. Like if all the Antifa and rioters and all the violent individuals that were kind of escalating things, if they just went after things that made sense for their movement, like even if a group of them put on masks and they found the guy who killed George Floyd and they freaking murked him at his house. Like, even though I'm a fan of due process, I could look at that action and be like, you know what, at least I get that. An eye for an eye. But let me burn down the store of the people who live down the block from me. Let me freaking steal a bunch of designer shoes in the name of George Floyd. Like, I don't know, man. Get I, I I guess I don't understand how anybody can look at that and be like, hell yeah, man, the movement. Like, it just seems kind of gross. Like,
Yeah.
like if I died because of a particular reason, like, say if I died in a situation because of police brutality, I wouldn't want a lot of people capitalizing on the movement and making it not about the movement. And I know most of the discussion is about police brutality because right now we have the abolish the police talking point. But
It's defund. There's not a lot of abolish.
it's a big thing in Minneapolis, and we're pretty close to Minneapolis.
I. It's defund.
Well, there's 9 out of 12 city council members wanted to abolish the police and replace it entirely.
And restructure a new civil law.
Is that actually happening? I heard the mayor was fighting it hardcore.
I don't know if it's actually happening. I can look it up.
Well, it's one of the. I can't even seem to get a straight answer. I haven't looked it up in like a week, but when I was looking up before, it was the mayor kept saying, "No, we're not doing that." Mayor Fry or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the city council members were showing up to BLM protests and stuff like that, and 9 out of 12 of them, which is enough to enact legislation
Mm-hmm.
without to the point where it's immune to the mayor's veto.
Yep. They got the supermajority.
Yeah, they got the supermajority, so they were able to get this passed. However, there's talk on whether or not they even have the authority to do that. Like, even if they have the supermajority to pass things with that amount of votes, there still might be limitations into what they can pass.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, man. You might, like I agree. Most police departments will probably opt for just defunding the police, but, I mean, abolishing the police is definitely going to be a talking point that's going to continue to grow popular in the coming years. Like, I don't think it's like, I don't think it's just some fear-mongering shit to be like, oh, they want to abolish the police, because plenty of them are saying they do. Like, plenty of people on the left are saying they do want to defund the police.
See, you just put abolish and defund.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting a little mixed up here.
Yeah.
That's because this is a confusing topic. They all want to defund the police, but more and more want to abolish it, even if it's not the majority right now.
I don't think it'll ever be the majority. That's just my opinion.
I mean, there's plenty of Do you keep up on the socialist anarchist communities on YouTube and stuff?
No.
Do you know what anarchism is?
Ruling for the people, by the people.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So like a lot of members of Antifa are like, even though we typically associate like socialists with them, a lot of them like want to transition to socialism but have the long-term ambition to transition to an anarchist society.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people would like to see a lot of these changes happen within their lifetime. So I'm just saying, and that group of people, like, all those ideas are becoming more and more mainstream. I've seen those communities on like Reddit and YouTube grow, and on Twitter grow over the past like half a decade. And I think as more young people are going to get to voting age, I think a large majority of them will probably keep those views, even though some of them might get less radical or whatever, or move a little bit more to the center. I think our society is growing sick of like corporate centrism.
Yeah.
So you're seeing like the alt-right become more powerful, and you're seeing the pro-revolution left becoming more like palatable and popular. And I just think ideas like abolishing the police, because like a lot of those people also want like the CIA to be abolished, but obviously that's nowhere near happening, so that's not talked about often because they don't think they can get it. But that's the thing, they'll talk about what they think they can get, and they want the police to be gone. It's only going to be talked about by them when it's in reach, because like obviously a large portion of any group will care about optics, care about public perception, and they know that something like abolish police is kind of a fringe idea,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's clearly becoming less and less fringe if we had like a supermajority in a city council, like move to try to get it passed. And hell, if it went well, I'm sure more cities would jump on board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it would go well though. Whether or not you think whether or not we can agree on whether or not it's a mainstream idea that they want to, that people in the movement want to abolish the police.
Yeah.
Do you how would you see like abolishing the police in the way that Minneapolis wants to do, where they replace it? How do you see that going? Like, what do you think would happen?
I do not know. I guess, well, you'd have to start out with some fundamental rules that you've been fighting for, that you wanted to institute in the Minneapolis Police Department. You'd have to find people willing and are able to follow and be able to,
So it's basically a mass
Yeah.
firing, a changing of values, and a rehiring.
be able to be held accountable if these fundamental beliefs aren't followed or broken in any way. So I think a whole different, I don't know, public safety arm.
Do you think they'd have guns?
No, I don't think so.
So kind of like a European style police.
Yeah.
Well, this concerns a lot of people, but I brought this up as an idea that we could do similar to like Europe.
Yeah.
Is where you still have cops with guns, but they're only called in needed situations. So you basically have a division of cops that are slightly more militarized, and then you have like the majority of your cops having only non-lethal things.
Yeah. And one thing that we can take from Europe, besides just the no guns, is they have very strict training policies that are enacted for their departments. Much stricter than the ones we have here. And I think that actually helps. And where the training is too.
Is the training longer too, I take it?
Yeah, there's several more hours here. I want to look it up. But the reason I say that is our police officers don't have enough training. They don't have enough training in the right areas, and more specifically speaking, like de-escalation, and more prone, or more what's the word? More focused on firearm training and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that whole militarization of police has also made departments more violent and led us to this point where we are today. Because when you're emphasizing something like a militarized police department, those members and officers are going to use the resources they have. And when you don't have the training necessary in de-escalation or anything like that, then you really only have one resource at your side.
Do you think there's really any way to de-escalate a situation without there also being a danger of it backfiring and the situation escalating?
Yeah, there is. But then I think you can take extra precautionary measures to ensure safety on all parties. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to shoot the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm always baffled why cops just don't reach for the taser more often.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a police, so I don't know. Police. I'm not a cop, so I don't understand the range of those tasers and like exactly how they work. But I mean, I've seen videos of people firing the range tasers. They seem pretty long range.
Yeah.
Seem pretty easy to use.
Yeah.
I think you only get one shot though.
Better make it count.
Yeah. I wonder if anybody carries two.
Yeah, I don't know.
Shit.
Yeah, but I think it needs to be back to whole abolish and then reform a public safety unit. It needs to be rebuilt fundamentally and structurally. It has to have whole new blueprint for what not only the community needs, but also what the community wants in a way. Because right now it's not working, and it hasn't worked for a decade and a half. Decades, actually. We've been at a stalemate, it seems, when it comes to ever since Rodney King.
Yeah.
In 94, like, I think it was 94.
When I guess I take issue with like words like not working, because if the police weren't working, they would never. That would mean that they're not effective at all. But
yeah.
I think a more accurate description of like
Flawed,
and there is collateral damage that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
It's essentially the main thing. It has a pretty big downside the way our police is run, even though there's fairly, I guess you could say, fairly large upside in the fact that, like, I imagine the cops are somewhat effective at catching crime because people are arrested for, like, violent crime and stuff.
Yeah.
Then people could point to the fact that violent crime, like, still happens and is very present in the United States. But I think the majority of the crime in the United States now, like, is probably drug related. If you're actually going by like volumes of crime, and honestly, like,
and non-violent offenses.
Yeah, I mean, this just goes back to what I think is really wrong is the criteria of what the cops are targeting as crime is like fundamentally flawed. Like, the war on drugs is like the main problem with our policing system.
Yeah.
Many of the other problems, so obviously not all, but a lot of the racism, a lot of the disproportionate arrests, a lot of the situations that escalate for basically no reason, a lot of that has to do with the war on drugs policies that police departments practice in order to catch drug offenders.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you decriminalized all drugs and legalized weed, and I draw the lines there because that's, I guess, what I'm most comfortable with. And really, I think a conversation, because I've talked to people, it's a good friend of mine at college is in the neuro program with me, and he agrees a lot with my opinion on ending the war on drugs being like the next major and logical step in reforming the police. But he thinks that all drugs should just be flat out legalized. And I guess I'm open to that conversation. It's hard for me to be like, yeah, man, heroin and meth should be legalized, because I would never condone the use of either of those drugs. But then, and I said that to him, but then he's like, well, just because it's legal, does that mean you have to condone it? And that's a good point. But I don't know. But I do think that even people who do those sorts of drugs should not be subject to, like, being arrested or treated shitty by cops. Like, I'm seeing so much, like, Candace Owens released a pretty freaking gross video about her, basically. He was no angeling about George Floyd, like, the entire fucking
conspiracy that he's still alive.
It was. Yeah. I've seen those, but that's not what I'm referring to.
Oh, yeah.
So, have you heard, like, the phrase, like, it's like a cliche of, like, he's no angeling, which is basically, like, saying that the person who was killed by the police was no angel, and you look at, like, laws they broke or something like that to justify it. And obviously, like, that doesn't justify a police killing. I think it's pretty gross to say that it does. Mm-hmm. But videos like hers basically pointing out that he might have been and probably was on fentanyl, which is like...
Yeah.
Which personally, and this goes into another conversation of, is it okay to talk about that? I think it's fine to mention that he was on fentanyl. I don't think that's where the focus of the story should be. And I see some, a lot of the alt-right people will focus on the fact that he broke the law and that he was on drugs and he was high and acting weird. But, like, that's no reason to be killed. I'd be a hypocrite if I said that. But
Yeah.
but that goes back to the legalization or at least decriminalization of drugs, because like even if heroin or fentanyl and all that stuff was still illegal but decriminalized, then the way the cops would deal with him, because he would no longer be a criminal, he would be somebody, he'd be a victim of the drug.
Yep.
And that's how I think a lot of hard drugs should be looked at. You know what I mean? Someone's a meth addict or heroin addict, they should be like given treatment, they should be suggested for treatment, and they should be maybe detained.
Yeah.
Given the situation, depending on what the situation is, but definitely not looked at as a criminal unless they're doing anything dangerous on top of that, like operating a vehicle or having a weapon. But if they're just somebody who's high or possessing drugs, I don't think there's any reason that
Yeah.
they should be treated. I don't know. What do you think of the whole decriminalization of like drugs?
Well, I think if you have harsher penalties for drug offenses, and I look at China as a main example because they have some of the harshest drug punishments in the entire world. Like, some people can be punishable by death for selling and making, but
Hasn't really worked.
no, they have a huge opium problem still. They have for half a century and more.
Thanks, the British.
Yeah. But I think if you have stricter laws on drugs, it just creates more of a friction between law enforcement and people using them, because they're not treated, like you said, as victims of a drug. They're treated as criminals, and though they are breaking the law, it's something that can be fixed. It's something that they can get help for.
Well,
and it should be treated as such. It should be treated as not an illness, but they are a victim to a very powerful substance that is making them, changing their brain chemistry and changing how they function. It's not they're doing it to harm other people. They're not stealing people's goods. They're not burning down buildings.
Well, what's interesting here is because you mentioned that for selling and stuff, there's really harsh punishments. I mean, obviously I have a lot of sympathy for people who are arrested with drugs, but I have a lot less sympathy on people who sell.
Yeah.
Well, with pot, I could care less. Like I think if you're dealing pot in an illegal state in the United States, I think you're probably a dummy.
But I think if you like decriminalize, that also makes it a lot less common.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for there to be, or less of a reason for there to be a dealer, if like you can get it. Well, if you decriminalize it,
like cigarettes, for example.
Well, those are legalized. Like the difference between
but like when they weren't, it was all, or when there were much harsher crimes for, say, making your own cigarettes or something like that. There were a lot more cigarettes being made, so you had laws that kind of backfired on you.
Isn't there still laws against making your own? Or selling them?
Yeah,
you can obviously roll your own.
Yeah, you also legalize them, and then kind of creates an equilibrium, per se.
Well, obviously, when you legalize stuff, the amount of dealers and the cartels and the illegal businesses behind like selling that stuff will go down or go away. Some capacity, but I think if you decriminalize something, it doesn't necessarily have that impact. Because if you decriminalize heroin, all that means is we're not going to be viewing people who do heroin as criminals, and they can't be punished as a criminal for it. That still means that the government isn't creating any way for them to buy heroin legally, so there still is demand for heroin dealers. You know what I mean? There still is demand for heroin, like manufacturers and traffickers.
Yeah, but it also creates an opportunity for like a private industry to just.
Not if it's only decriminalized and not legalized. There's a difference.
Oh, okay, yeah, I guess, yeah, you're right. My bad.
For sure. And I mean, that's why I'm saying, like, that's why when the other guy who I was talking to said, like, we need to go farther than just decriminalizing our drugs and we legalize them, part of me is like, yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I also don't like the idea of, like, how far do you go with that? Do you have people, like, be able to buy, like, freaking heroin from, like, their local heroin store?
Yeah.
Like, that unsettles a lot of people, and it should, because do we really want that to be the new normal?
Yeah.
Kind of, I don't know. We've gone on a little bit of a tangent, but just to reel it back in a little bit, I think that if you want the police to stop disproportionately targeting people who commit nonviolent crimes, the source of all nonviolent police escalation has to come with how they target the war on drugs. And the reason politicians continue to support the war on drugs is because it's profitable. That's why China does it. That's why the United States does it. Like, it's not even, like, you know how you said there's friction between, like, the anti-drug laws and the people who do drugs?
Yeah.
It's not even, like, the friction between that's necessarily causing more of it. It's the fact that when, a lot of times when countries illegalize drugs and have a war on drugs, they don't even want the drug problem to completely go away because it's profitable. And they can use a lot of authoritarian power through enforcing the drug laws.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an infinite feedback system.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, let's go back to what we were talking about.
Back to George Floyd?
Back to George Floyd, yeah. For a second. Joe Biden had a quote the other day that got a lot of attention. I think it was something along the lines of George Floyd's death had more of an impact on the world than Martin Luther King's, and he went under a lot of fire for that. But I see why people criticize it, but I also think it makes sense because you have a murder happen within the borders of the United States, and you have countries gathering by the millions protesting something that's not even going on in their country.
I mean, do you think that happened when, I guess I don't really know, but did anything like that happen when Martin Luther King was shot?
No, it was not worldwide. It happened with Nelson Mandela when he died, or when he went to jail.
Does that, do you think that might have something to do with how news spreads?
Yeah.
Like in today's modern age versus how it did back then?
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting because, like, I'm sure there's plenty of people who are getting all bent out of shape at Joe Biden for saying that. And to be honest, like, I'm not entirely sure I agree with Joe Biden's statement, but I don't think we should make people afraid to say takes like that. Like saying that someone's death was more impactful than another when the death has an obvious political impact. Yeah. I think we're allowed to make various, I don't know, kind of like analyze history and different events in a way without being judged. Like I'm sure there's people who are giving Joe Biden flack saying that he's like being disrespectful to Martin Luther King or some crap like that. Yeah. I don't think that holds water. But more to his actual claim, I don't know though. Like do you think we're gonna be learning about George Floyd in school? Like
no.
Like
well, I mean,
spend a lot of time learning about Martin Luther King.
And we learned about Rodney King in school.
Gonna be honest, I'm not even sure if I did learn about Rodney King in school.
I remember learning about it in school.
When did you learn?
I think it was sophomore year.
Oh, that's probably why I was an A push.
Oh, wow, big smart guy over here.
Yeah, we just focused on how we genocided a bunch of Native Americans instead of that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a funny thing about Christopher Columbus online.
Oh yeah, because they tore a statue down.
Yeah. They took the statue down in Minneapolis, right? And then they threw it in a fountain. And it was like, hey, maybe this dizzy motherfucker will finally find Atlantis or something like that.
Oof.
Yeah. And it made me laugh. And, you know, we can talk about that too, about these a lot of monuments being torn down and a lot of division. Like I feel like this happens every year where
It does, because it's like I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of like positions and I guess say action for revolution that a growing number of people are like on board with, and they just wait for a thing to happen, and they use that thing as, we're doing this now, even though we wanted to do this for a while.
yeah,
Like, I think it's the same thing with a lot of these, like, tearing down the statues. Like, because, like you said, this happens like every few years after a thing happens. They're not like, people who are tearing down the Christopher Columbus statue already wanted to do it.
hmm
Just looking for an opportunity.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, do you think, and you could even argue that it's a good time to do it. Like, everybody's riled up against the establishment. People want like some sort of radical change or revolution, so they rip down Christopher Columbus or Confederate generals or other statues of things that are basically past relics that people don't like anymore.
Yeah.
To try to usher on to the new age and throw that old age behind. I mean, I don't know. Do you think throwing down the statues like that is like, I don't know, do you agree with it? Like, specifically Christopher Columbus one.
Yeah, I agree. I've always supported removing those statues.
I mean, do you think?
I feel like what they're trying to what the people want them to represent is not. It's not working. It's not a big. It's not what people are getting from it. Like Nathan Bedford, for example, who founder of the KKK, Tennessee's. His statue still stands in Tennessee. I think it was.
The founder of the KKK has
Yeah.
a statue?
Yeah.
It's all fucked.
He was a senator, so that's why he has a statue.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. But I feel like, yeah, you can put on a plaque.
Where was he a senator of?
Let me see. I think it was Tennessee. But you can put it on a plaque that, hey, he's a U.S. senator, or hey, this man founded America, but the principles and actions of which he founded it on are immoral. And
Oh, the KKK guy, I think. Pretty easy to make an argument for why his should be torn down, because you could argue that even though he was involved in American politics, his contribution to American politics was nothing but negative, and nothing like what we want to do today, and kind of moving in the direction of a more fascist, non-American regime, and that it shouldn't be honored. Columbus is a more interesting point, because Columbus, like 1492, there was a lot of degenerate racist people back then.
yeah,
Not even a lot, I would dare say all. And I don't know, man. I think Columbus was kind of a retard, anyways. Little blunt with my language. I apologize for being ableist, but
yeah,
but I do think he was like relatively not that smart of a guy. Apparently, his crewmates didn't like him. He was obviously very cruel to islanders. Have them bring him like when they ask him for, he'd ask like islanders for gold. They'd bring him like corn, and he'd like cut him in half. Stuff like that.
Or like the mass rape that occurred.
Yeah, I mean, frickin', it's hard to imagine a colony that wasn't mass raping like freaking natives back then.
Yeah.
Like, imperialism was brutal, like in its early stages.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because, I don't know, is there anybody who sailed to like the American colonies in 1492 who, if we have to go off of, they had to be a good person? Because like obviously Columbus was a shitty person, but like, would anybody from that time be worthy of a statue by today's standards? That's the interesting thing. Like anybody. Like, would we have any statues of that time? Finding America?
No, probably not. Do you need them though?
I mean, you don't need them.
Yeah.
I can understand why somebody would want them, because you could argue that even though Christopher Columbus was a bad guy, the point of his statue. So the reason it's different than the KKK senators is because his plaque was because he was part of the government, but his entire contribution to the government was inherently negative because he was bringing it more because he was probably, most of his career was probably just trying to keep segregation and all these, like, bad policies going.
Yeah.
Whereas,
And that was my fault. He was actually a Confederate general, not a senator.
okay.
But the first Grand Wizard of the KKK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, well, I don't know. Changes things a little bit if he's a Confederate general, but not by much.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because when you get into when you get into war history, things change a little bit. But I would also probably look to like Germany and point out that they don't have any more statues of Adolf Hitler or any Nazis, and that's probably a good thing. And we should follow.
Fly the Nazi flag.
Yeah, and we should. I don't necessarily think it should be illegal to fly the Confederate flag.
Really?
I don't think it should be illegal, no.
Why?
I
They
think
tried to secede from the country as an entire nation over owning people.
I mean, I'm just gonna go like I've tried to argue the whole thing about, and maybe it's just the free speech part of me trying to argue the thing about the Confederate flag. To be honest, I guess it just boils down to me not giving a shit, but that might also go back to the fact that I'm not the group that's being oppressed or singled out by the flag, and therefore I just wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
And yeah, probably that's a big factor here. But all I'm really going to say about it is the fact that there's plenty of other cultural depictions that had the Confederate flag on it, like the car from Dukes of Hazzard's, the General Lee, and they have to cover that. That car's in a museum because it's like a very valuable car, and now they like cover the Confederate flag top of it, even though that was like a very iconic piece of the car, and it was like you've seen the car, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
And a bunch of other things. There was a metal guitarist for the metal band Pantera. Guy was killed on stage, actually. Freaking murdered while performing. His name was Dimebag Darrell. Was his nickname. He had and I imagine it's probably worth something if it didn't get destroyed and still exists. He had it was a V or some sort of crazy guitar. I don't know if it was a V, but it was some crazy shaped, like, really awesome looking metal guitar that had the Confederate flag on it because he was, like, from the South, you know?
Yeah.
And I think there's just a lot of, like, cultural stuff with, like, the South since then that doesn't necessarily have to do with racism, although I haven't actually surrounded myself with that group enough to be able to say whether or not that's... But yeah, I get what you're saying.
You can say that now that there's a lot of cultural things, but the whole premise on which the flag was
But the thing, but that's also older and more time has passed for there to be different cultural significance with that than the Nazi flag. Like,
you know, Nazis fly the Nazis in Germany fly the Confederate flag because the swastika is banned.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, then this goes to the next, like, obviously Confederate flag's a more intense version of it because in its conception it was like...
It's more...
No, not than the swastika, what I'm about to lead into. So, like, you remember Pepe the Frog, right?
Yeah.
You know how that became, like, an alt-right symbol?
Yeah.
This goes into the things of, should we let the people using the symbols for the worst of reasons be, like... Should we let them ruin the symbol for everybody? Obviously, the Confederate flag is rooted more in, like...
But it was started for the worst reasons, too.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying there was time.
Yeah.
There was time in between. And I know Pepe was started as a meme and then was used as a shooter symbol afterwards.
Yeah.
But... Yeah, I don't know. The Confederate flag one's interesting because I really just don't want to say it should be illegal because I just don't like crossing that line.
The military's not allowing it on any more ships.
Well, that's fine though because not even fine. That's fucking fantastic. And the reason I say that is... I was
surprised that was allowed before.
I mean, same to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's like, the military is like what we show as like our power and the arm that like enforces our like law, especially because in a lot of ways our military, even if it's wrongfully so, is in a lot of ways the world police. It's like wrong to have the Confederate flag associated with that. But if you're just some freaking punk country kid from the South, and you're like rebelling with your truck, put a Confederate flag on that, I don't know, should that be a crime on its own? I have a hard time with that one. And also, like, there's memorabilia that has Confederate flag on it that's worse stuff. Should all that stuff just be defaced and stuff? My dad has old license plates with Confederate flags on them because he collects, like, a lot of license plates. Should he just not have those? Should he have to turn those in?
No. I'm just saying, like, the flag in general from here on out.
So if it's illegalized, that's the thing. Like, does that mean if I'm collecting items that have the Confederate flag on them, I have to cover them up or have, like, licenses to have them?
No, the piece of cloth itself.
So it's not the depiction of the flag, it's just the flag.
Yes.
Okay, I'll give you that. That's a lot more focus. Well, when I think of the flag, I think of the image because what's a flag but an image? You know what I mean?
True.
Like I imagine in Germany, it's probably illegal to depict swastikas apart from a flag as well. It's not just a cloth. I mean, why do you think when they remade freaking Kino die Toten, the zombie map, the one where they're in the theater?
Yeah.
When they remade Kino, it's the Iron Cross instead of the swastika.
Yeah.
That's another thing. They still use the Iron Cross as a military symbol in Germany sometimes, and it was used far before the Nazis were a thing. But white supremacists use the Iron Cross because they can't use the swastika because it's like a safer symbol. So now does Germany have to change their symbol from the Iron Cross because white supremacists are using the Iron Cross to dog whistle? They most definitely are using it to dog whistle.
But then again, the Iron Cross wasn't founded on...
But it was also used during... The Iron Cross was used side by side during the swastika.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
My whole idea...
If it's founded, it should be,
it's the principle on what it's founded on, And for me, the Confederate flag is founded on treason and alienation from an entire country based on the property of people.
But bro, don't you know the Confederate flag is, or the Confederate States was, Civil War was about states' rights, dude?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm joking. It was about slavery, but it's about the states' rights to own slaves, more specifically.
Yeah.
But no, that's an interesting thing about the symbols. Like, it's just gonna be hard to get me to say yes on the Confederate flag thing. But like, I think you're a jackass if you fly the flag.
Yeah.
Like, that's another thing. Like, when you start banning symbols like that, they just use another symbol, and then guess what? It becomes more covert. So now it's like, oh, he's using the Iron Cross. Is he really dog whistling? The Iron Cross is also a Jordanian symbol. This was a real thing about PewDiePie. PewDiePie, because there's controversy that PewDiePie might be a Nazi. Have you heard about that crap? So apparently, during one video, he was wearing a shirt, and this was already after his controversy. He was wearing a shirt where the collar had an Iron Cross, and people were saying that was a Nazi dog whistle. But the Iron Cross is also like a Jordanian symbol for peace or something. Some fashion designer from Jordan uses iron crosses a lot in his clothes. Apparently PewDiePie has been known to buy from that guy. But even if all of this is true, he could still specifically pick out one with an iron cross visible to dog whistle to his people. And now it's more up in the air because since they can't use the obvious symbols because the obvious symbols are illegalized or whatever, now the Nazis are in the shadows or with all these things that we can't really tell. Like, I don't know, part of me, like, obviously it'd be terrifying if people were comfortable enough to walk out and openly be Nazis, but at the same time, like, people on the internet making their shitty videos, like, trying to radicalize people, I almost prefer those people are more, like, fucking out and about it, because then I can at least be like, all right, this guy's a Nazi, but now they're like sneaking around and like, it's hard to say, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's something to be said about when you start taking away all the symbols, people using the symbols aren't going to stop trying to make more symbols. That's how this became a racist dog whistle.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny that those guys in the military, there was, the whole controversy of the guys in the military school who were doing that, but they were clearly they weren't doing it for white supremacist purposes. It was quite obvious the circle game thing, like, because they were like putting it below their legs and shit.
Yeah. And like that picture from that school in Madison that went to the Capitol building in Madison, and a couple students were doing that. That went viral for a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't see that, but like,
kids got suspended for it.
I guarantee you, like, okay, maybe not guarantee you because I don't know what's in their head. Fuck, maybe they were white supremacists.
Yeah, true.
But I mean, chances are there's people being suspended for shit like that who like didn't even realize white supremacists were using it. That's because that's still a pretty like, I don't expect everybody to know that at this point.
I didn't know that until that incident.
My cousin told me that like 6 months ago or something, maybe longer than that, maybe like a year ago. He thought he was fucking with me, and he was like, "Yeah, man, this is the W and this is the P for white power," and I was like, "Huh."
Wow.
Yeah, apparently that's why they do that.
I did not know that. I just knew it was. I didn't actually like.
Yeah, see, the freaking people who report on the fact that it's racist don't even understand what about it makes it racist.
Yeah. So what else do you want to talk about this episode?
I don't know. We really pounded away about freaking the Confederate flag for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just to bring that to a conclusion, you know what, Hunter? Although I don't like the idea of people being fucking arrested for showing it, I don't think people should be in general showing the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
I think you're kind of a loser if you do.
Yeah.
I tear down the monuments. Of the Confederate generals. I don't really give a shit. I think there's a case to be made in favor of Christopher Columbus just because he might have been a terrible person, but he still did something.
True.
Like, Winston Churchill was a racist. Are we going to be tearing down statues of him in the future? I mean, maybe. But, like, he still did something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if what you're being, like, with a Confederate general, with what they're being celebrated for, is inherently, like, fighting a racist cause, so I can understand wanting to tear them down.
Then they lost.
Yeah. There's, like, no... Like, there's almost no argument to be made for why they should be kept up other than the fact that it's just easier to keep them up.
The only thing I wouldn't mind is if they made busts. Like, really bad. Like, they have one of...
really intentionally bad busts.
Yeah. And added context on, like, a plaque instead of just saying, hey, this guy was a Confederate general.
So what do you mean by a bad bust? Like, it
Like,
has to look shitty?
Yeah. They, like, on purpose.
I don't know. Why not just leave it alone at that point? Do we got to go out of our way to make shitty busts? Well, what does that accomplish? I'm just curious. Like, you can already teach that the people are bad. Do we really need to, like, fucking immortalize their face, like, deformed and be like, look at this asshole? I don't know, just...
Yeah.
I don't have a moral opposition to that. I just think it's more or less pointless.
I guess technically speaking, a bust is the upper part of, like, the shoulders up of a statue. But, like, my whole thing is you make them intentionally look bad.
Are people doing this?
Huh?
Are places doing this?
No, it will never be done.
Where did this come from?
I
Is this
just
a
saw it
Hunter
on
original?
Twitter the other day. I'm like, that's genius.
I don't know. It's funny,
Yeah.
but that's like, I don't know. It's almost like,
Think of something more unifying, though. Tearing it down, probably.
See, the thing like that is even those things, like, even though you could argue that tearing down, and I think it's mostly true that tearing down, like, the Confederate general statues is, like, there's, like, no reason not to.
Yeah.
It's, like, inherently not unifying because a lot of people oppose it who aren't white supremacists.
Yeah.
Like, obviously there's a lot of white supremacists. All the white supremacists would oppose it.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of people who are just uncomfortable with history being defaced that don't want to see it torn down. That's kind of where I'm at with the Confederate flag. I just care less about the fucking people because, like, fucking do something shitty and you fight for a bad cause your whole life.
Yeah.
So you don't deserve to be immortalized, but, like, I given all the context that the flag has gone through with how it's changed and been part of pop culture over the years, that's why I just hesitate about the flag. But like, still doesn't mean that I don't think you should be flying it, or that I think you should be flying it. Like it literally just goes with the fact that I think depicting the pieces of culture in which it appeared in that weren't racist, I don't think the depictions of the flag in those contexts are racist. But flying it on its own and being like, yeah, I'm a Confederate general till the end, that's not that anybody would ever talk that way.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's
Wrong.
wrong, or at least at the very least stupid. Because
Yeah.
I think there's plenty of people who would just fly it, think it's like a Southern rebellion symbol.
Southern pride.
Huh.
Yeah. That whole Southern pride aspect to it too just bothers me. Fly your state flag. Besides the Georgia one. You ever seen the Georgia?
What's the Georgia flag? Is it racist?
It's ironic.
Should I pull this up on the computer?
Yeah. It's pretty symbolic of the Confederate flag, in my opinion. It's alright. You can't figure it out.
No, I can do it. I'm just not as fluent at this as I'd like to be.
Bingo!
It's showing up. So what am I looking at? Georgia flag?
Georgia state flag, yeah.
I don't know if I want to type on stream, dude. I'm so illiterate with my typing.
Just do it. Just do it carefully.
I don't know how to spell Georgia.
G-E-O-R. Wow, that's...
We're just going for it. We're just going for it, dude.
There it is.
I can't type. It's a failure of the education system in America.
Yeah.
Oh my God, don't do that to me. Just give me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can see that.
Yeah.
So what about it?
Exactly. I think it just looks a little I hate it. I just hate it. There's something about it.
Well, is there something about it that's supposed to be racist? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I don't know.
What's like if they're
the
actually
whole state in general is just kind of.
Okay, well this is turning into a shitting on Georgia fest, but I'm actually what's actually wrong with the flag? Is it the fact that they mention God in the Constitution?
No, it's not the fact that they mention God.
Well, like wisdom, moderation, in God we trust, justice,
Yeah.
Constitution. I mean, is this guy supposed to be a Confederate? Is that like what I'm missing here?
I don't know.
He looks more like a Yankee than anything else.
Oh, they got, is that 13 stars? Can't count.
Let's group them up. Yeah.
Yeah. Represent the 13.
I mean, I guess I just don't understand
I just
why you
hate
don't.
it.
Give me a better reason, and it can't be anything about Georgia. It has to be a problem with the flag. What don't you like about the flag?
I don't know. Why do they only have... They have such big lines.
No, they don't, though.
The big, bold lines? Yeah, they do.
Yeah, well, it's the same size of lines as Italy or Mexico or any of those, or Germany or any of those other states.
Yeah, but it just looks weird when you have that.
When it's obscured like the American flag, you know, other countries do a similar layout where they have the 3 flag lines and then they have a square. Like this is not a very
Let's
unique
just move
flag.
on. I just
Hunter, I need to know why you don't like it. I need like a coherent reason. Like, is it like an aesthetic thing? Is it?
It's like you had a middle school drawing contest to see who could draw the best state flag, and you were gonna pick the winner, and this was the winner.
Okay, Do you want to go down the rabbit
It's
hole?
like the drug poster in middle school.
Do you want to go the rabbit hole of looking at state flags and seeing if there's worse ones? Because I guarantee you this isn't even the worst one.
No. Because I'm going to find a worse one right now. We should probably just end this episode, shouldn't we?
Yeah. Wow. Oh my fucking god. just
Because, like...
Yeah, this is shifting. And
Yeah.
we've gotten pretty far away from George Floyd and current events. I don't know, is there anything we should add to the... Like I'm thinking about clarifying my stances before we end this, but other than that would you like to do that?
No. I don't think I have anything I need to clarify. What do you want to clarify? You go ahead.
I don't know. Police brutality, bad. Ending the war on drugs, good. Destroying communities, not good. I don't think the two are linked. I think you're giving the alt-right fire if you try to say that peaceful protests and rioters are inherently linked, because people like my
Let's make something clear though. Alt-right is part of these, like, it's not just Antifa that is there.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Like, real quickly, we can mention. Do you know about that umbrella cop?
The umbrella cop, the one that burnt down the...
Well, he broke windows of an AutoZone.
AutoZone, yeah.
There's still controversy on whether or not he was a cop. I'm leaning towards I think he was a cop.
Yeah.
But what do you think of all that? Jacob Peterson's the guy's
Yeah.
name.
Yeah. His ex-wife identified him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think was he punished?
I don't know. You couldn't really... He had half of his face covered.
The eyes look the same. Have
Yeah.
you seen the? But like, I don't know. Maybe it's cheating to say that. That has to be him because of the eyes. Maybe that's not fair.
Or the ex-wife just trying to stir the pot.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's really hard to say for sure, but like, I don't know. That's a tough one because I've heard people on the right saying that he was a member of Antifa, not a cop.
The people on the right saying that he was a member of Antifa.
Yeah. I mean, assuming he wasn't that cop and it was just somebody who looked like him, I mean, it's possible. But I guess we don't really know. I mean, I kind of lean towards he was a cop.
Well, there's proof that he was a cop.
I mean, actual proof other than just the photo and the stuff by his ex-wife?
Yeah, he worked for the St. Paul Police Department.
Well, the guy was a cop, or
Oh, like the act. If it was him, if it was
yes,
the guy,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, yes.
Was Umbrella Man a cop?
Yeah. Okay.
Like, yeah. And I don't know that. Another thing we should talk about. We should talk about this earlier. I kind of forgot. Do you think that all 4 of the police officers should go to jail?
Yeah.
Do you think they should all go to jail on murder charges?
Aiding and abetting. Sorry, not abetting.
I mean, I think they should all be punished in some way. I guess. Also, I don't even think all the 3 other officers should even all get the same punishment, because a couple of them were newer cops who were outranked and were less involved in the situation, and there was another one that was clearly more facilitating.
Well, 2 were kneeling on the guy's legs. One was the guy caught on camera trying to talk to the people videotaping, and the other one was just standing. No, there was no more.
Well, one of the cops said was kind of like being. You can hear him in the tapes, like awkwardly being like to the. What's the main cop's name? Was it Derek?
Yeah, Chauvin.
Yeah, Derek Chauvin.
Yeah.
He's like saying to Derek Chauvin, like, maybe we should flip him over or get off him, or something like that. He says something like that, and Derek just like ignores him. I don't know. It's pretty easy to imagine like a relatively newer cop who's never been in a situation like this, is having no idea what to do and being outranked by other people and kind of just sitting there awkwardly. Obviously, it's still a sign of the person's a weak man. Also, why are we still on the Georgia flag, dude?
Because we hate it. Let's end this, man.
What?
We should end this one. Go on to the next one.
Oh my God! But we're still talking about George Floyd.
Okay, let's go.
When we're done with this George Floyd conversation, we'll end it.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought, but I don't know. It's just easy for me to understand that maybe some of those officers, like their stories should be listened to because maybe they just felt like they were in lack of control, and like obviously they could have done something and they should have done something, and it's a sign of being a weak person that they didn't. But I think being complicit is less of a sign of being bad and more of a sign of being weak. You get what I'm saying? Especially when you're not the one calling the shots.
But
yeah, they have
you can hear
responsibility.
their stories, but what's to say they're not just going to come to the aid of Derek Chauvin and protect him at all costs? What's to say their stories?
Do these cops have any particular loyalty to Derek Chauvin? We don't even know.
Well, there's a particular code that a lot of cops go by. It's called the Blue Wall of Trust, I think, where there is in no form do cops and departments speak out against improper police conduct in the field. So you don't snitch.
Is that a thing that's a fucking sign, or is that just
no? It's like a brotherly code. Snitch, don't snitch.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be real. People are human, and this whole thing's been publicized.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not genuine, I guarantee all three of those cops are more than happy to throw Derek under the bus now.
Yeah.
Like, the department's clearly gearing up for throwing him under the bus.
Blue Wall of Silence.
Blue Wall of Silence. Do you think that, do you think they'll be able to charge him with second-degree murder? Or do you think that's overcharging him?
No, I think it'll be easier to charge him with second degree than third degree.
Why is that?
Well, let me just be sure.
You have to prove that there's two ways he could be charged with second-degree murder. Either you charge him with a felony on top of that, like felony battery, which you could do, and because if you commit a murder while committing a felony, it's automatically second-degree or higher. But if they somehow don't get the felony battery case or the other felony case or another felony case or felony charge pushed through and they try to do second degree without trying to charge him for another felony, then it will probably fail because then they have to prove that in the moment he made a conscious decision to kill the guy.
Yeah.
Third degree is you take actions that might hurt or kill a guy and it ends up killing him. So, it's for sure third degree. I'm just worried they're going to overcharge the dude. Can you imagine the unrest if the guy got off?
Yeah.
Still a 33% chance because they're going to probably have this unless somebody steps in and puts it in an area that will for sure give him the maximum, which they could easily do, try him in the city courts. But they're probably going to move it to, a mostly white jury court, like they often do with cops and stuff. But maybe they'll make a point to not do that because the world's watching now. I don't know. It's more important to me that he just goes away other than trying to get the biggest possible charge.
Judge set his bail at over $1 million.
Really?
Yeah.
It's pretty.
I think it was 1.25.
Damn.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Well, anyways, hopefully he rots in jail, gets the maximum. I don't want cops like that on my streets.
Probably won't last long in jail.
Probably won't. Oh, yeah. Oh, fuck, man. Being a cop in jail?
Yeah.
Oh, my God, dude. I can't even imagine.
Not good.
Not
Anyway,
good.
it was a good episode. We covered a lot of stuff. We hate the Georgia flag.
I don't think it's that bad.
I do. It's alright.
Okay. You know what? We'll save this discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright. Thanks for listening, guys. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, all your favorite platforms. I'm not sure if this one's going on YouTube, but we'll see. There is going to be a YouTube channel shortly.
We do have this one has been filmed.
Yep. So if you want to watch the video, go ahead. Look up our YouTube channel. What's it called, Sid?
Two commoners.
Two Commoners. You can find us there. Subscribe, like,
Don't,
comment,
don't forget to follow our Twitter.
and follow us on Twitter at 2Commoners. Thanks for listening.
Have a great day, guys.